Please welcome to the stage Joanna Robinson, Tara Hernandez, and Damon Lindelof.
Hello, how are you all doing? Excellent. I'm Joanna Robinson. I am a writer and podcaster at The Ringer, and I am here for a very special conversation with these two fine folks. They are responsible for a few things you might have heard of, maybe Lost, maybe The Leftovers, maybe Big Bang Theory, maybe Watchmen. Yeah, just a few things you might have heard of, right? But they are collaborating for the first time on this new show called Mrs. Davis. This is Tara Hernandez, by the way, and Damon Lindelof. So we're here to talk about Mrs. Davis, obviously, their new show, and also their careers, their collaborations. I have a lot of questions. I'm very curious about these folks. But if you have any questions, about 45 minutes in, we're going to go to your questions. If you want to go into the South by app, you can submit your questions via the sort of Slido feature, and then it'll pop up here like magic for me, and then I will ask your question on your behalf. So if I am not asking the question that is burning a hole in your brain, then go on the app. All right. Hello. How are y'all doing?
Hi, Joanna. Hello, everyone.
What do we do if we have questions?
Use the app, man. Use the app.
Yeah. Did you not hear? Use the app.
Got it. Sorry.
Guy.
Check.
I want to start. Well, first, actually, I want to ask the crowd really quickly. How many people here are people who are interested in going into making television, or are you just fans? Making television.
Nice.
Okay, great. So we're going to do a little like mini career retrospective and ask you, what was your first job in television, Tara?
Oh, my God. Well, my first experience with television was I was in the audience when my mom was on a show called Pyramid with Donny Osmond. That's my... She won, by the way. She cleared the pyramid. She did. But my first job in television, I was an intern at Warner Brothers in development, who I work very closely with now. But I started as their summer intern for a magical 2 months of summer in a year I'm not going to give you, so you can't figure out how old I am.
Damon?
My first job in TV was I was a writer's assistant, and that job is basically it's a catch-all. You do everything from get lunches and coffees to making copies and stuff like that. But the best part of the job is that you get to sit in the writer's room with your laptop and you basically write down everything that the writers say. And that was for a show called Wasteland. And if anybody in this room has heard of that show, it's a miracle. It was canceled after 2 episodes. It was it was Kevin Williamson's follow-up to Dawson's Creek. And it was on ABC, and the pitch was, what if Friends but a drama? And
that didn't go?
No, it didn't go.
Oh, okay.
And it was Miramax's first television show. So another reason it should.
A wonderful relic of the entertainment industry. I love that. Okay.
Yes.
And then, Tara, did you always know you wanted to do this ever since you saw your mom on the pyramid, or?
Yeah, I was like, look, move over, Susie. You need that limelight. No, I mean, I probably like probably all of you in this room, like just loved movies, love entertainment, television. There's that magical time where you don't know that people create it. It just like shows up in this box in your house and you're just like, this is amazing. And then, you grow and you get wiser and you learn that there's, people who actually are craftspeople and they work in this industry in Hollywood. And so for me, I was sort of sniffing around that I wanted to work in entertainment in some capacity. I didn't know exactly that it was going to be writing. I went to film school. I went to Chapman University in Orange County, California, and it was a great opportunity to sort of try out everything. And from that, was able to, get into try being in the editing bay and doing sound and being like, you're terrible at this. Next. And, migrated over to the writing side. And in television, there's this amazing job that is also a curse where you get to do all of it. And it's called showrunner. And so it's been great to sort of use that culmination of things that I learned, years back in film school to do this job that I have now.
Damon, what's your TV origin story?
Can I tell it?
Please. No. We were going to do a whole Freaky Friday bit, but
It's not too late.
no, it isn't. My television origin story, this was not traumatic, although whenever I say it, I always feel that it's a sob story, but I was raised by a television. Both of my parents worked full time, and I was an only child, and they both, I grew up in New Jersey, and they both worked in New York City, so they commuted, and so, not when I was like 3, I think someone was watching me, but from like 4.
And not in a poltergeisty way,
Yeah.
like in a real.
But I was just like the television was my sort of like fundamental companion, and and in our house, particularly with my mother, we talked at the television and to the television as if it could hear us, and so it was just a permanent and very comfortable fixture, and watched way too much of it, but also sort of fell in love with the same idea that Tara is talking about, which is it felt a bit like magic to me. And it was also, when I was growing up in the 80s, a lot of the shows that I was obsessed with were made, in the 1950s. Like I was really interested in, like Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best, and that, these shows that were black and white. It felt like time traveling to some degree, and it's crazy to think now that my 16-year-old son sees things that are set in the like 1980s with the same set of nostalgia, but it like I feel like that's how I really kind of like learned about the world, and I had intimate relationships with the characters because unlike the movies, which I also love, the television characters were scaled to my size. They were the same size as I was versus these giants to sort of worship. So it wasn't until I think that the first moment where I was like, someone is making this, and oh, maybe that means that one day I could make this, was Twin Peaks. And yeah, it's my father who exposed me to like all the genre that I fell in love with. He and I would watch that show and record it on VHS, and then as soon as the episode was over, we would watch it again, and then multiple times until the next episode was on. And I think that level of sort of like deep engagement, understanding like, oh, okay, like this is like I used to read books and comic books over and over again, but that was the first television show that I watched repeatedly. And so kind of saying to myself like, oh, it would be so cool one day if I could try to make anything half as cool as Twin Peaks, just the Peaks part, or the Twin part, one of those.
One of the two. Well, I'm so glad you brought up Lynch and Twin Peaks, because Tara, something you said to me the other night was that your through line for what you were interested in was weird. Mm-hmm. The word you used was weird. Yes. You land in this world of comedy. You're a comedy writer. And I'm wondering, A, how you got into comedy in the first place. B, how you stayed in touch with your love of the weird through that comedy career that you had.
Yeah, I mean, how I got into comedy. I think I grew up in a Mexican household where dinners were like what I now realize like writers' rooms. Like everyone's just trying to like one up each other and like tell jokes and like get a word in. And my husband over here is nodding because he's been to these meals and he's just like always like terrified and like, am I supposed to say something? Like just wait for your turn. But I think comedy specifically, like I didn't have experience writing it until I got the job on Big Bang, and I started as an assistant on that show. I was an assistant to the showrunners, and once I saw what they did, I decided to become like a student of comedy. So I would watch Cheers or Mary Tyler Moore and the pilots and like dissect these projects, and the more I dove into them, the more of a fan I became. And you sort of realize comedy or drama, the through line is character, and you have Sam and Diane or Mary, and you have these amazing characters, and they can do funny things and heartbreaking things. And so I just became a fan of craft on the page, and there's so much craft in comedy scripts. There's like joke I think someone had like dissected a 30 Rock script once, and like there's a joke every 14 seconds. And you're like, that is impossible. That's amazing. That's so much craft. It's so brilliant. And so became a student of it and just dove in. And then when I became a comedy writer myself, was then whiplashed by how hard it is. It's not family dinner, it's your job now, and you have to be funny for a living, which is quite tough. But I think always wanted to learn and grow. I was naturally a fan of genre. We talked about Buffy and how that was so formative for us, as storytellers and women. And so it was like, how could we match this sort of comedy with something that is different in genre and quirky and weird? And, getting paired up with Damon, I sort of, always recognize the weird in his work, and recognize the squids falling from the sky. I'm like, this dude's hilarious. Like, this is funny. And so it became this perfect fusion when they let us collaborate and make this very weird, zany show.
I've been described as funny many times in my life, but never in the comedic sense. It was always sort of more like there's something funny about that guy.
There's something a little funny about
Funny look.
Like it's a sort of concern area. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Damon, then a question about genre, because the question I have about getting into the world of genre is how do you create genre stories and keep the stories feeling very human, very anchored, and relatable the way that you do?
I think that like part of that question requires the necessary response, which is I'm going to be using the I pronoun a lot, but as Tara sort of like already indicated, the reason that I love television so much is because, and the reason that I feel like I've had a lot more success in TV than I have in other mediums, particularly movies, is because we group right. And so I think that a big part of sitting in a room with like 8 other individuals who come and look at genre in particular from different angles, a big part of my process has always been making sure that there are people in that room who are not as like in love with genre as I am. And so that idea of like the only place that where you can find commonality is in this area that you're describing, which is like character. And then ultimately, when you talk about the genre shows that we love, whether it's Twin Peaks or Buffy or The Expanse, or even things that take place centuries from now or millennia from now, you always start from the thing that feels the most relatable to you, which is a person who is having the same kind of experiences that we have as people, and the same kind of relationship issues that we have as people, and the same struggles and fears and anxieties that we have. And so the idea, once you bring the genre elements in, if you start it from a place of like, what would a actual person do in this circumstance, then it starts to, I really hate using the word grounded because it's become such a buzzword for how we make good genre television. It's like, we really need you to ground it. And I think like that the reason that I hate using it is and this, not to segue into Mrs. Davis immediately, but the thing that really drew me to Tara and to Tara's writing is that it has lift. And I think that the idea of like, we spend so much of our lives being grounded. Sometimes we look to fiction to lift us up and to allow us to kind of get some relief and release. And we all kind of like, when you, there's nothing more depressing than having a flying dream and waking up and being like, fuck, like that I am back here on the ground again. And I do think that making something relatable, the word that we're always chasing, particularly on a show as absurd and ridiculous as Mrs. Davis can become at times, is authenticity. The sort of idea of like, does it feel real? Does it feel like someone would do, even in an absurd situation, that at least they're behaving with some degree of reality? And you just you just talk it to death until everybody's convinced, or you've just worn everybody down. One of those.
Backstage before we came on, Damon was saying he'd never done a panel about a show that no one in the audience has seen. And then he was like, good luck, Joanna. Good luck with that. So then I'm going to ask Tara, can you just give us, what is the show about, Mrs. Davis?
Okay. Well, we've got some nuns here, so we know that's an element of the show. And thank you.
Oh, I thought they were just enjoying their South by.
They're just commenting. Sisters. Yeah. So our series is about a nun, specifically a nun named Simone, Sister Simone, and she is on a quest to destroy an all-powerful algorithm known as Mrs. Davis. So she's given an opportunity to do so, and it's going to take her on a sprawling adventure as she tries to accomplish this task.
Did she do it, Damon? Anything you want to add?
She did it.
Yeah, I think she did it.
No. Yeah, she's asking.
Did I do it?
If you successfully.
Did I
Yeah,
successfully?
encapsulate your own
does
show.
Simone defeat the
Simone.
algorithm?
No spoilers.
No, we're not telling.
No spoilers.
No, I think
right
that's
to it.
that's phenomenal. I mean, that's the show.
That's
it's
the
none
show.
versus AI. Who you got?
Who you got?
That's-
Yeah, we know
Place
who
your
we
bets.
got, but
Yeah,
who you
right.
got?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did the story come about? Who was the originator, or is this a joint idea, Damon?
It's definitely a joint idea. I mean, in the sense of, in my own telling of it, it started with Tara, in the sense of Tara and I just finished Watchmen, was looking for my next project, was definitely not wanting to run the show, and was wanting to like kind of coming to the realization of I'm taking up a chair, and the best, if I vacate this chair and I change my position to, being a supporter of someone else's vision as opposed to trying to jam my own vision down everybody's throats, that would probably be more pleasant for me and for everybody who knows me. And so I reached out to people that I really trust, one of whom is here, Susan Rovner, who was like the first meeting that I took, and now runs Peacock, but at the time was at Warner Brothers, and she had signed Tara to her deal. And I said, I want someone with a very unique voice who's never showrun before, because they won't be institutionalized to think that they know how to do it, and that's when you get the most exciting stuff. But they should have some television experience, because I think that the idea of like just, you wrote like a great play, now you're going to suddenly, the first time you're ever working in TV, you have to be the manager, you have to be the big boss. That's a lot to ask of anyone. And so just send me some scripts. And I sort of said this to a couple of the agencies in town, and I got a big stack of scripts. And truth be told, you read like 5 or 10 pages of these things, and you just determine whether or not that's someone that you want to meet with. And I read this one script, and I read the whole thing. It was so good, and I was like, "Who the fuck is Tara Hernandez?" And then I looked up. I just Googled her and saw that she was a writer on Big Bang Theory and Young Sheldon, and I immediately sort of felt the same thing that I think, and again, this is going to sound somewhat snobby and arrogant, but I think that a lot of people in our town say they want to break the formula. It's like, I want to make TV that breaks the formula, but they never learn the formula. And before I worked on Lost, I was working in procedural dramas. I worked on Nash Bridges. I worked on Crossing Jordan. I spent 5 years making 25 of these episodes a year, and there's a very specific, formula that you have to follow. So by time I got the phone call and had the opportunity to make Lost, I was like, I must destroy this formula. But I think it is the difference between like saying this is how I want to cook and like only eating food and not preparing it. And so when I read Tara's sample, which is called Mercy House, and it was about nuns, and it was post-apocalyptic but funny, and weird, and just wonderful. And I was like, I just recognized something on the page, and again, I was like, I just have to meet this person, and we met. And we had a great meeting. We talked a bit about nuns. We talked about. I said to her, like, "What do you want to make a show about?" And she said, "Let me give that a think." And then COVID happened. And so I'll let you pick up this part of the story. But now we had just met. There was a desire with basically complete tabula rasa to make something together that may have nuns in it, and then we were suddenly like not allowed to leave our houses.
Except to go on like walks in our respective neighborhoods.
Not with each other.
No, not at all.
No.
Like we would have to be across the street
Yes.
from one another. But we, you know, it was sort of, and when we say we met, and then, you know, California went into lockdown that day. So it was really, you know, it was a really terrifying time.
Coincidence?
I mean, come on.
Weird.
When these powers collide. So we, you know, we sort of picked up the conversation about 2 weeks later. And I think, you know, as creatives, as many of you are, you find comfort in the creative and in, you know, your process and what you know how to do, which is create stories. And so we would just, you know, spend like an hour, 2 hours on the phone while we were like walking our dogs, and a chat about stories that we wanted to tell. You know, nuns were still of interest to us, but inevitably the conversation would sort of devolve into this, like, and also, you know, what are you hearing about groceries? Like, do we still wash them? Do we, you know, like,
They
can
might
I-
not, if you're not from Los Angeles, we washed our groceries.
that might not be a
We
Texas
bought
thing.
disinfectant and like we would buy our groceries and then we would disinfect them and
Even
then
the
leave them in the
ones-
sun
yeah.
so that the COVID would die.
I know, and you guys like that's California,
Right, yes.
Even like bananas, where it's like I'm not gonna eat the peel, but like I'm still gonna just in case. Yeah, it was a wild.
You're
time.
like, do you have a toilet paper guy? Do you have a line on
there was
supply?
there was a Postmates that was delivering tacos and toilet paper, so it was like. But you know, we were all kind of joking, but it was also a time where it felt like we were just in need of answers, as absurd as they might be. You know, I have a toilet paper guy, or you know, I recognize my neighbor's older and they might not have toilet paper. I'm gonna take some over, you know, and drop it off. So there was inherent exchanging of information, but it was all based on hearsay, and so it really felt like, can we just have something to tell us what to do? Some authoritarian voice, you know, that really knows. And that was the nugget. And, you know, I think one of us
You said,
said it.
I wish there was an app
I
that
knew
would just
that.
tell me what to do. Yeah.
that's more a generational thing, probably. But yes, we were like, oh, that's, like how subversive. That's so exciting. And so we had the nun idea sort of as a placeholder, but it was like, oh, that's actually perfect. You know, if there's this technology that's sort of behaving as this omnipotent, wow, like godlike, you know, voice in our lives, like, of course that's gonna, you know, brush up against a nun's value system. And so really that was sort of the juicy center, and all things came out from there. And as Damon said, we were both feeling the pressures of the time and, you know, the project you had just done, and you were looking for something with lift. I think when you read my script, you're like, this is great. You're like, it's just too dark, man. I can't do something this dark again. It's like, I get that. That's fine. So we knew the ingredient was nun, VAI, plus lift and joy and zany and weird, and here we go.
Post-apocalypse like loses its charm when you're in the context of apocalypse. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
Tara keeps using the word that I used on her, which is zany. I wanted to ask you about having experienced both of your works and studied both of your works. When I watch this show, I feel like I can pull out what seems like Damon and pull out what seems like Tara. Can you see that when you watch a show, like clearly your own fingerprints on certain elements, or does it feel a little bit messier than that? What do you think, Tara?
Well, I think, and this is absolutely true, and this is not blowing smoke. Like, you can feel everybody who is involved in it. You absolutely can. You know the Betty of it all and what she brought when she was cast, and how she elevated the character with her real point of view and her choices. And it's beyond what you even put on the page. You hope for something, and then she takes it another level. You bring on a director who has a real point of view, and Owen Harris did our pilot, and you absolutely see him in every element. So again, television is so collaborative as an art form. So if you're lucky, you have amazing collaborators that you trust, and you've brought them on because they have really clear points of view and really clear visions. And, then you get to be in the amazing position of saying, here's the map, here's the script, here's what, the scenes I wrote, here's the scenes Damon wrote. We have been over each other's work, and, and go, and then everyone brings it forward. Then you get into the process of developing the season, and you have a writer's room, and you see them in every color and shade of character. And it is what's so joyful about the process, is not just seeing yourself, but seeing everybody that you've been fortunate enough to work with.
Damon, you've done shows with a co-showrunner. You've showrun by yourself. When you watch Mrs. Davis, what is it like? How much of you does it feel like is in there? How much does this feel similar to what you've done before? How different does this feel?
Great question. I'm not doing like a panel bit, but like not a huge fan of myself, and so when a big part of my process is getting the myself out of the work as much as possible, and so there's a direct proportion between how much I like it, to how little of myself I see in the thing, and that's why it's true.
Artists.
Yeah, and so after I had the experience on Watchmen, where although I was, we live in a culture that's like that's the showrunner. It was to say it was a collaborative process, but it was more along the lines of we were all on a road trip and just different people were taking turns driving. And the things that I loved most about the show were things that just I had nothing to do with. And I got it must feel like when you're like the curator of a museum and you're just like someone brings in an incredible piece of art and your job is to just figure out which room to hang it in and how to light it. But like you're just like this thing was made without me, and so I just wanted to replicate that process as much as possible. And I think a big part of it was, can I find someone who will kick me out of the editing room? Because our town is built around hierarchy, patriarchy, all of these systems that sort of exist. And so the idea of like I need to find someone who is who's going to say thank you for your input, I've got this, once they feel that they can do that. And so it was just conversations that Tara and I had where I was sort of like, we're not co-show running the show, we're co-creating the show. I'm definitely going to be annoying and around a lot in the writer's room, but there will become times where I pitch an idea that you do not like, or I'm pulling the room in a direction that you're like, no, come over here, and you just need to do it. And and I felt like, oh, I'm being so benevolent right now. When it started to happen, I was like, wait a minute, you're supposed to do this on my terms. But every time the result was like it was like a magic trick. Like I was just like, oh, this is awesome. So it's not like I had to take a step back, but I started to become much more comfortable in that role. And of all the television that I've been involved in, I'm like delighted by watching episodes of Mrs. Davis more than anything else. I think because Tara, ran the show, and again, we had incredible collaborators, an incredible cast. She gave voice and creative decision-making powers to first-time writers in the room who took that opportunity and sort of ran with it, knowing that they had someone blocking and guiding them through the process. So again, it's when you stop saying that's not the way that I would have done it, and like, wow, it's really cool the way someone else is doing it. I haven't been in someone else's room since it was for 20 years now, and it was wonderful.
I mean, I love how often you guys keep talking about collaboration on this collaboration panel, but Tara, yeah, you are the showrunner of this show. It's your first time running a show. Tell me what it was like. What lessons did you learn?
Oh my God. Yeah. And to that point, and Damon was incredible because we co-created, we developed this idea together, for about a year before we even, went out and pitched it. And, then when Peacock picked up the show and gave us the opportunity to go into the writer's room, he said, what do you want from me? It's yours now. What would you like to do? and I can be there in the room, or I can step back. Like it's your call. And I was like, if my first job as showrunner is like not having Damon Lindelof in my writer's room, like I don't deserve this job. That would be so idiotic. So, it's the choices. It is really who you, I'm gonna say it again, collaborate with. And it is about building your small council, building your team, and putting those pieces together, and recognizing who loves the show, who gets the show. This isn't a totally intuitive show. On the first bounce, the script was so wild. We'd get feedback on it, and most of the time it was like, "What? This is crazy." But the people who said this is crazy, I get it and I see it and I know what you guys are trying to do. So hiring practices is such a big part of doing the job. Is bringing on the teammates who are gonna take it and then take it that much further. I think maybe I'm not a parent, but I'm sure in the way that parents sort of have a new respect for their parents, I sort of had this I need to go back and talk to every showrunner I've ever worked for and just be like, wow, yeah, I'm sorry, and I respect you even more, having done the job for the first time. And I think I just learned to, at the end of the day, you have been given this amazing opportunity, and they have said, you're doing this job because we want to hear what you have to say, and what's your voice, what are your thoughts on the world through story. And so as amazing as your team is, you are the final decision maker, and you have to trust your gut, and you have to sometimes make very unpopular decisions that everyone said, we all thought it was that other thing. And you're like, you know what? I'm doing this, guys. More hippos, which will make sense when you guys finally see the show. But it just...
You will not say not enough hippos.
You will be the right
that's
level.
Not a note we're gonna get.
Yeah, and you're the only one cracking up in an editing, bay, because you're like, this just entertains me. I can't really tell you why I think hippos are so funny, but they are. You have to listen to that voice, and luckily, that is the curse and the dream of this job. Is it's your choice, and you get to put it out there, and if you're lucky enough, you see it come to fruition. So it's a wonderful, terrifying honor of a position. But I think for people who love to wear so many hats in this industry, it's what you want to be doing.
Damon, for the people who raise their hand and are thinking of getting into this world of TV making, other than more hippos, do you have any, what's your best piece of advice?
I don't know what my best piece of advice is, but I would say that a really important part of it is to get your hands on scripts, television episodes of both shows that you are familiar with and shows that you aren't familiar with. And it's also a really interesting exercise to read the pilot of a show that you love, or to revisit the pilot of a show that you love, and then just basically jump to season 4 and then read a script, or watch another episode of it and try to kind of map what they knew what they knew at the very beginning and what changed so significantly. I was doing basically a mock writer's room for a friend, and the exercise was to do a reboot of the X-Files. So I rewatched the X-Files pilot, and it was amazing to me how much of what the show was in the pilot, and how much of the show changed radically from things that they were doing in the pilot. And I do think that there's a real clarity as a storyteller that emerges when you can see the before and after photo. Our culture is obsessed with the before and after photo. This person looked like this 6 months ago and they look like this now, and you don't want to talk about the 6 intervening months of how they got from A to B. And we want to write a very simple story where it's they just did intermittent fasting, or whatever the fuck that made them change. But it's much more complicated and nuanced. And I think that this sort of idea of kind of deconstructing these pieces and starting to kind of try to see the ones and zeros in the storytelling, there is a scientific approach to it, and so that's the rough advice that I give. And reading is different than watching. there's a lot of craft that goes into television writing, and you'd probably be surprised reading scripts for shows that you love, just in terms of how different of an experience it is when you don't see it being performed and executed.
And a really good resource, if any of you are based in LA, a really good resource for that is the WGA library. You don't have to be in the guild. You can just go, and there's tons of scripts that you can just read. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given, Tara?
Oh my goodness, so many. The one that sticks with me, I was, as I mentioned, I was interning in Warner Brothers development, and the last day, the head of development at the time, Len Goldstein, he said, "Be nice and be honest." And I thought that was really simple and really elegant. And it is hard. It's hard. Honest can be, admitting to your mistakes, having to say, "Oh, I did drop that call," or "I did, forget to book your meeting." But it's scary. But I think the more you can be honest, both with yourself, in your work, in your storytelling, and just be kind to people. It's really simple. I think it's a really good piece of advice.
I'm curious then, again, these folks haven't seen the show, but maybe it's interesting to talk about some of the things that influence the show. So, Tara, are there any shows that influence the show, and are any of them underwatched, beloved shows that are streaming on Prime right now?
Are you teeing up a Patriot reference?
I think we should talk about Patriot.
I think we would all like to talk. I mean, honestly, who's seen, and we're not talking about Patriot with Mel Gibson, the movie. We're talking about Patriot, Stephen Conrad's brilliant show on it. Yes. Okay. We sort of...
Everybody else leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not for you. We're going to get even more exclusive.
Patriot dive now. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I don't know who saw it first or recommended it. I don't quite remember, but it's just, it's kind of on the surface like this, espionage spy show, but it's got all these like incredible layers to it, and it's funny, but it's intense, and it can make you laugh and make you cry, kind of thing. So I think just to do something different, I think was the greatest influence from that. I won't say it's stylistically or inherently a replica, but I thought it was such a brave show that it was just like unlike anything else, and was doing sort of all the things again rooted in character. So that was so fun. And we've talked about Buffy earlier. I think you have a badass female lead, and like you can't get away from like a Buffy reference. But I'm gonna actually steal I'm gonna plagiarize Betty Gilpin right now, and she says that the show is No Country for Old Looney Tunes. I think it's her exact reference, and I think the suggestion in something like that is Coen Brothers meets Looney Tunes meets like the absurdity of Bugs Bunny, and what I add to that is it does have this sort of sprawling Western spirit. This is a hero's journey. They're gonna have a there and back again sort of adventure, and I think that's just really classic storytelling. So yeah, what else you got?
I agree with everything that you said. I think that it's also got a weird heisty energy. There is an episode that is very specifically designed as a heist, but the whole show functions. We talked about heists all the time in terms of things that you're doing early in the storytelling that when you watch them again have added meaning. And it's I've always been obsessed with cons, and so the idea of how can you maintain this degree of character authenticity, but also the like baked into the pie of the show is this idea that it's designed to be incredibly pleasurable watching it the first time, but if you watch it a second time, once you know what's really going on, it really rewards that foreknowledge. And then I think like the other element of the show that we just always talked about was that there's like an adventure Indiana Jones kind of vibe to it, where like this whole idea of people don't necessarily think of the Indiana Jones films. they're clearly genre, but they don't think of them as supernatural movies. And it's like, have you seen the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark? Like, have you like the and so this idea of adventure with sort of a shading of the supernaturality, I love, and I know that a lot of people want things to be clearly defined for them. You don't want to walk into a restaurant without knowing what kind of cuisine it is. Like that can be sort of terrifying. But I think that the idea of being surprised by what's being put in front of you it can be quite incredible. And I do think that if the surprise is executed with a tremendous amount of care, and more importantly, you make it fair. You tell the audience, hey, like, we might be planning a surprise party for you. If you're not cool with that, you should probably watch something else. But like, and then it's our job to kind of pull the rug out from under you without betraying the authenticity for the characters.
One of the last questions I have before we roll on to our next segment is you mentioned AI is a huge part of the show. A lot of people are talking about AI more than ever because of ChatGPT and other things. You do not have to confirm or deny whether or not this is a viral marketing for Mrs. Davis, but
Peacock is that good.
Yeah, they're pretty good. But what's on your mind, Tara, these days about AI? What are you thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of, and I think Simone as a character is firmly planted in the, we'll say, opposition and fear. I sort of come from a place of like, when it's unknown and I kind of don't understand it, I inherently like adopt like a, my reflex is to like crouch and be like, I don't understand. But I think, I think right now it's still sort of trending into like, it's funny. It's funny to talk about like how Sydney, which I think is like Microsoft's chatbot, like tried to break up a reporter's marriage. Like it still kind of has that like humorous attempts at humanity and, and appearing human. So I think my personal relationship is like, ha ha ha, until we don't realize how it's manipulating our lives. So cautiously entertained is my official position on AI.
Damon, where are you on the entertained scale, or do you have the sort of Skynet creeping heebie-jeebies?
From I'm a human living on the planet and where's all this heading level, I have a different opinion than I do as a storyteller. As a storyteller, I understand the draw and the allure of machine learning. We build a computer, the computer becomes sentient, and then the first thing that it decides to do is wipe us out every time. And there's just a part of me that's always been like, but what if it wanted to do something else? Like, isn't it our job as storytellers to see if it wanted to do anything else? And that was part of Mrs. Davis, which is at least it or she fashions herself as a benevolent algorithm and in service of optimizing us as humans versus destroying us. Because once we're all wiped out, we're all, fucking batteries in some post-apocalypse. That it doesn't look like the machines are having fun in the Matrix. Like you could have so much more fun, with those capabilities. And then as a person living in the world, I'll just say I'm into words and semantics matter to me, and the phrase artificial intelligence, there's nothing in my life that's artificial that's good. Like the artificial sweetener is killing me. I know it is. It's like 10 times sweeter than actual sugar. And so if something is artificial, it means it's not real. And if it's not real, it worries me.
Wait till you need a hip.
Right.
Like
then
it's going to be like
an artificial hip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll love that thing.
Thankful.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well,
Until then.
that's your takeaway, folks. Wait till I need a hip. I turned 50 next week. The clock is ticking.
All right. So as we mentioned a couple times, the audience hasn't seen the show yet, though you can see it tomorrow at the Stateside, 5:00. But Tara, we have something to show them, right?
We do, because you guys have been awesome, just hanging in with us on this show. You've seen nothing, so we would love to reward your patience and enthusiasm with an exclusive preview of the trailer, meaning this room is seeing it. No one else has seen this trailer but you guys.
We saw it.
Well, we did.
Yeah.
And yeah, okay, when I say no one,
Once.
I haven't seen it.
Joanna hasn't seen it.
I'll be craning my neck to watch it.
Yes. So we're very excited to present the first trailer of Mrs. Davis.
Is it okay if I proxy? Sorry, she'll speak to me through here, and then I'll just repeat whatever she says.
Not she. It. It is a machine.
She wants to talk.
Talk
To you.
If I say no, it's just gonna send someone else, isn't it? Probably.
You are the only person on the planet who can fulfill this quest. You must locate the Holy Grail.
The what now?
Mrs. Davis is all-knowing and all-powerful. She not only knows you're coming for her, but she wants you to.
Then I better get going.
Wiley?
What is that on your face?
What, stash? A lot's changed since I last saw you. Meet the resistance.
What are you resisting?
Same thing you are. The algorithm.
Mrs. Davis?
Don't give it a 9! No one calls Facebook Doug.
This is what it does. Everyone you meet is only trying to push you into doing what it wants.
It's just a matter of time before every person on Earth does whatever it asks them to.
I'm the best weapon you've got.
Are you all out of your minds?
Hey, Mom.
Let's party. Hello?
Hi. I'm looking for the Grail. The Holy One.
All right. Pretty good?
Joanna, thoughts?
That was great. Yeah, I liked it. All right, so now I'm going to read your questions. They're in front of us here. Let's start with Chris Hartwell's question, which says, Damon, you once said, writing what you don't know can lead to growth, learning. What did you learn / how did you grow through writing Mrs. Davis?
Wow, that's a great question. Thank you. Thank you, Chris Hartwell. Yeah, this is a reference to this sort of idea of like what writers are all told, write what you know. And for me, that was incredibly limiting because I didn't know anything. And so, oh God, like I've learned so many things about Mrs. Davis. I would say just one thing from the outset is that, Tara and I spent all this time in the bubble kind of creating the show, and it was just about finding the rhythms between the two of us. And if we both liked an idea, it was full steam ahead. And so by the time the other writers came on, we were, very pregnant with our version of the show, which, Peacock said, yeah, we want this, understanding that they'd only read the pilot and heard kind of our pitch for the series, but now we actually had to start writing this thing. And a number of the writers in the room basically said, but before we kind of dive in, we need to have a conversation about what a benevolent AI even is. Benevolent for who, And so that led to just an amazing conversation about needing to create and put a lot of story energy into the how this thing was built from a pure coding level. We had, we had people from this amazing writer, Johnny Sun, who had a background in tech. Nadaru Italo was, had come from gaming. And so that, like, I learned, we had to ended up building an algorithm ourselves in the process of the show because we wanted him to name the episode titles. What was the name of the algorithm that we built, Tara?
Larry Belair.
Larry Belair was the name of our algorithm. And Larry Belair was very bad at naming episodic titles at first, but we had to. So I learned a lot about AI and how dumb it is, and also how wonderful it is.
How about you, Tara?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I second all of that, and there's always so much to learn. And I think that on this show in particular, because as I said, my natural stance with all of this is a bit fearful, and we were just so lucky by the writers' room that we populated, and so they were very kind and generous with bringing us into this world. So the compliment that we receive on the show, which is like, how did you guys know? Did you have a crystal ball and know that ChatGPT or it was going to be so sort of timely when the show came out, I think is entirely owed to our writers who just had their finger on the pulse of it all. So ditto Damon.
Speaking of the writer's room, this is a process question from Mickey Lynn, who says, post-pandemic, has there been changes to the writer's room process? Are you still physically in the office all the time with whiteboards, or is it more virtual now? And a polite thank you from Mickey.
Yeah, thank you, Mickey. That's so kind. Yeah, I mean, we rode the waves of whatever was safe to do, that our studio had set out for us. So we started in person, which was awful because we were in masks. Terrible. And you realize so much of the writer's room is just that, reading facial expressions, and specifically because we hadn't, Damon and I had never been in a room together, and learning just those little twinges. I think you would be like, are you scowling? And I'd be like, no, this is my thinking face. Like I like that picture.
Just see your eyes.
Yeah. So when you just have,
we just started to have to say like, I'm smiling under here.
Yeah.
That got a laugh, a quiet one.
Yeah.
We did the room on Zoom, which is its other challenges. But again, the writers, being the savvy young people that they are, would just like, that's a heart emoji. And I was like, oh, fire. Okay, great. Now that I thinks that pitch is fire. So that must be a good direction. So I think, the benefit is that you can have rooms that aren't bound to being in LA. And I think that's exciting. It makes the process more accessible to people wherever they are, and I think there's a real benefit of people from different parts of the country or even the world to get to participate in rooms. I think we got better as we went along, but you don't get lunch brought to you on Zoom, so I would say that was a bummer.
Let's go to the question from Matt Herrera, who says, what are your favorite comic stories, characters, or creators other than Watchmen? Watchmen is not allowed to be the answer.
Seems
Damon.
obvious, yeah.
Yeah.
They all have to be from the same. I mean, I'm a Paper Girls fan.
Yeah.
Ryan Vaughn.
Yeah, I mean, in Saga, just
Saga too.
Genius. That's my answer.
Yeah, no, you took mine. Oh, thank you for clarity.
He wants to say Watchmen so badly. This is just like so hard for him.
My Chris Claremont's run on X-Men was sort of like my, the kind of beginning of me becoming obsessed with like the night before a new issue of a comic book came out. But like, all the the Spidey books and stuff like that. I was a Marvel guy, so yeah, that was my early inspiration.
I really love this question from Casey Byers, who says, when it comes to listening to that voice, quote unquote, of a muse, how do you ensure that you do not lose that quote unquote voice as you are working on the script /work? Tara, talk to me about muses.
Great question.
Oh my gosh. Breathing, deep breathing. It's hard, Casey. It's really hard. That's a great question. It's probably unique to everybody. What you sort of do, what your process is, it's just trusting it even when it's hard and pushing through, because it's going to be hard more than it's easy. The voice is not going to be talking to you more than it is talking to you. But when it does, it's just about trying to keep that antenna up, trying not to get, dissuaded by, is that a word? Yeah, that's a word. Dissuaded.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. By the process and the fear and terror that creeps in most of the time, and just like one foot in front of the other. And I would say also, like, try and write every day if you can, just get something down, even if it's a paragraph or a long text to a family member that you owe them. It's just like getting it out and, and working at it and building that muscle every day.
I guess I would just add that that the concept of a muse, again, not to try to show off all my Greek mythology 101 knowledge that I had to take when I went to college, but there is an inherent romance. Like sort of a romantic notion, and I think that the writing process can be very romantic. And like romance, if you allow yourself to question why you're falling in love with something, you can very easily talk yourself out of it, because love is very dangerous. It's dangerous for every. I'll go out on a limb here and say most of us in this room have experienced love being scary, or frightening, or dangerous. And so this idea of sort of like, I feel like I'm falling for something and I need to stop that sensation in my body, and I need to be pragmatic and realistic. And that's safe too. But when you can't hear the muse anymore, that's when you have to kind of remind yourself why you fell in love with it in the first place. And so, write with romance in your heart, because the process can really try to drag that out of you. I like dissuade, like DISSWAYED.
It sounded
right. Like
yeah. But then the muse went quiet, and I was like, oh no.
There you go.
You
I'm gonna start using it.
You abandoned me in front of all these people.
Yeah.
So Jason has a question about works that have inspired you, but since we sort of hit on that a little bit, I guess, Jason, please allow me to yes and your prompt and say, what about works that inspired Mrs. Davis that no one would think of in a million years? Do you know? Oftentimes there's an ingredient in the soup that people would never be able to guess.
I'm going to get ahead of this right now because there's a line in the script, and I believe I wrote it and didn't even think about it. It just it came out very, easily in a script. My husband and I were watching A Knight's Tale the other night, and I hadn't seen it in a decade. It's a great movie. And it was like, that's in Mrs. Davis. And I was like, I didn't even know that I was just keeping that inside of me this whole time. So if you're like, that's from A Knight's Tale, I know that now. So yeah, I'm gonna say we can all have that experience together. It's a great film. If you haven't seen it or haven't seen it in a while, it's fantastic.
I'm not going to say why, but I'm going to say Pinocchio. Not Guillermo del Toro's
Freshly Oscar-winning.
Yeah, maybe his Pinocchio as well. But yes, there's Pinocchio-esque elements here.
I can't dissuade you from using
my nose
that
growing
word,
right now?
that
Yeah,
word that
exactly.
you.
But I also do, because Jason did ask the question, so I'm gonna turn this around, and I'm gonna answer for Damon, because I think I have
That's
one of your
fun,
favorite
yeah.
movies in mind. I know the film posters that are in your office, but if maybe one you haven't talked about is Willy Wonka is a big inspiration in your work. And when you were talking about being in the TV, you've talked about Mike TV before, living inside that television box. So Damon, Willy Wonka, that's a exclusive.
And I will say my favorite thing about Willy Wonka, and I have lots of favorite things, is how horrifically manipulative he is. And it starts with the cane trick, where he pretends to fall and he's fine, but that's actually a setup for how duplicitous that everything that he's doing is by a grander design. And then he pivots from "Good day, sir" to "You are getting the fucking factory." And I think that going on that ride of "I'm going to abuse you," and in the book, murder you or disfigure you, but also that I can pick a successor. They're has always kind of electrified me, as most fairy tales do, because of that idea of they're a little bit terrifying. Mrs. Davis, I don't think is that scary, but there is a sense of, the anxiety of, am I in good hands here? What am I being manipulated? Is one of my favorite kinds of story, and it's why I'm so obsessed with religion, because what is religion if not the question, am I being manipulated? Sorry, God.
Sorry, sisters.
Sorry to all the nuns in the room. Yeah.
You can strike me with lightning, but I'm grounded.
We don't use that word, man.
Yeah, right.
Okay, well, then last thing, since Tara, daughter of a pyramid contestant, has turned this into the Newlywed Game, Damon, what is your answer for Tara?
So easy.
Oh, in terms of an inspiration that is in there that, oh God, I'm gonna have to think on that. As like, I think it's all there living on the surface.
There's 9 of them in this franchise, about to be a 10th one.
Episodes?
Film
franchise.
family?
Oh my God, yes. Tara loves the Fast and the Furious franchise. And so do I, but I don't know the names of all the characters, you know?
Dominic Toretto. Maybe.
Yes.
Come on.
And I got her for Valentine's Day. Sorry, Mark, but the it's called the Toretto House.
Yes.
This is a toy that you can buy, and it's just the house
box.
that Dominic Toretto lives in. And I've never seen you so happy.
House means family.
Yeah, it does.
Perfect.
Yes.
Well, on that note, thank you so much to Damon, to Tara, to South by, to Peacock. You can see Mrs. Davis on Peacock on April 20th. First 4 episodes are dropping at once, and then every Thursday thereafter for eternity.
Or tomorrow here.
Or I was getting to that, I promise. Tomorrow at the Stateside, 5 o'clock. These 2 will be there, as well as some of the cast will be there as well. So, yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you all for your great
everybody.
questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.